has evolved and evolved to a point where it's just crossed all boundaries and flavors, it's also extremely important to always go back to one's roots and enjoy the food that you've grown up enjoying eating. One such dish that all of us love, or rather one such style of cooking that all of us love, is our famous, gorgeous curries. You have them in the form of fish curries or meat curries, but that's something that's soulful, comforting, and what we enjoy day in and day out. While we've done curries dime a dozen, and that's something that I always fall back to, in today's cooking, I'm going to get to creating a Jamaican goat curry, and it is created in Jamaica through the Indian influence into that entire subcontinent. Pair this along with a very highly flavorful herbed rice, and you have a meal that is unique, stylish, but at the same time touching on those sentiments in your roots. Let's get to creating it. Like all curries, there is a lot of love that goes into it, and the recipes can get so complex and tedious to create. So this Jamaican goat curry is really simplified. I'm using a kg and a half of goat meat with the bone in, preferably medium-sized pieces, because you want this to cook for nearly an hour. To this, I'm going to flavor it with some curry powder. So use curry powder that suits your family's needs. So out here I'm using the hot curry powder, and nearly 3 tablespoons of that is going to go and marinate the meat. Not for too long, just for about 15 minutes. 3 tablespoons of this along with soy sauce, and that's what gives it that dark color that's so known for in a Jamaican goat curry. So about 3 tablespoons of dark soy sauce going on top. We're not going to add any salt out here, but we're going to allow everything to marinate really well with some normal cooking oil. So I'm using cold pressed sunflower oil out here, about 50 mils of that, just so that everything mixes well together. Get your hands in and mix the whole thing well together. With the goat marinating for nearly 15 minutes, into a cast iron pot, I'm going to use about 20 mils of cold pressed sunflower oil. And into that, I'm going to add nearly 100-gram slab of garlic butter. Garlic and herbs just elevate this dish. Just allow all this to melt and sizzle away, infusing with each other. And we get to searing the goat. On the highest possible flame, while it's sizzling away, in goes the marinated goat, just so that it sears. And we're going to allow it to cook and sear on all sides for at least 8 minutes. Keep stirring it so that it gets well marbled and brown. As the mutton sears away in the garlic butter infusion, we're going to create a slurry now to cook, and this is an extremely important step because you need this to cook right. So I've taken half a cup of water into a bowl, and into that I'm going to add 3 tablespoons, heaped rather, because we love the heat that curry powder brings, and create that slurry. So 3 tablespoons of hot curry powder, and we're just going to form that perfect slurry that will cook as soon as we lift off the mutton from the pan. 8 minutes of allowing this to sear on the highest possible flame. It's time to just lift it off back into a bowl and get to creating that curry now. So the Herculean task of lifting all the pieces and make sure it doesn't splash on you. A tip out here, this is really a non-forgiving gravy because it tends to splash on anything while working. So be careful and lift everything off the pan. Lower the temperature, and whether on medium heat or preferably even the slowest possible heat, in goes the slurry that we had created. Just pour that in, and this is a very crucial step because there's nothing most unsatisfying than a paste that has not been cooked really well. So cook this for at least 5 to 10 minutes on the slowest possible simmer. Stir till it cooks really well for at least 5 minutes. You can at this time add in some additional spices like cumin powder, so about 2 teaspoons of cumin powder along with 1.5 tablespoons of a gorgeous Indian spice. That's the famed and glorious spice, that's the garam masala. So put everything in and just allow this to cook. Now while you're cooking it, if you find it to get too dry, just add another 100 ml of water and allow it to cook well. The best way to know that your paste is done when you see little specks of oil on top and it gets that dark color. Immediately back in goes the mutton. I'm just being clumsy and dunking everything in. You can be a little refined and use the ladle. Allow everything to mix well and coat each other for another 3 to 4 minutes, just so that the flavors merge with each other. A fine sprinkle of some iodized salt, and no fancy salts here. I'm just going as basic and as close to its roots. A quick stir so that the salt mixes well. And now goes in 2 cups of hot water, just so that it forms a curry. Along with 250 ml of coconut milk. While we've given this a quick stir, now comes the infusion of flavors. 8 cloves of garlic finely chopped, along with 1.5 inch of ginger, 5 fresh bay leaves just roughly torn into half going in, a large stack of some dried thyme, along with an overload of some cilantro, about 4 tablespoons, and lastly some allspice gorgeous berries going in, about a teaspoonful of it. Give all this a quick mix, and it's time to add in the onions, the bell peppers, and all that makes this a holistic curry. So I've taken 3 whole onions, peeled it, just cut it 1/4, and they go in, along with 2 red bell peppers finely chopped, and an overload of some spring onions, about 4 spring onions finely sliced going in. All this gets a quick stir and you have to bring it to a roaring boil now. While cooking mutton curry, you need to check on the quality of the mutton that you use. If it is tough, cook it for an hour and a half. Or like me, I'm giving it an hour to 15 minutes because I want it to fall off the bone. So as this has come to a roaring boil, we're just going to lower the flame on the slowest possible temperature. I may just actually move flame so that I get the lowest possible heat. Cook it covered for a good 45 minutes. While technically the Jamaican goat curry pairs really well with some steamed rice, but an African rice like a jollof rice, or what I'm doing, a herb-scented rice, is something that just accentuates and flavors the entire meal. To start off, in a cast iron, I'm just going to use about 20 ml of cold-pressed sunflower oil. I'm just going to let it get nice and hot before we add in all the herbs, the flavorings, and create this rice. With the oil nice and hot, in goes 2 fresh red chilies finely sliced, and it's going to give that color and heat, along with an inch of ginger. As these infuse, in goes 6 cloves of garlic finely minced. I'm just going to let everything scent and stain my pot. 4 fresh bay leaves going in as well, just to flavor this, and I'm going to allow the garlic and the ginger to get a subtle shade of brown before adding in 1 red onion finely chopped. While making a herb rice, you do not want to burn the herbs, but at the same time you want it to release all its essential oils. So in goes a tablespoon of dehydrated thyme, along with 2 sprigs of dehydrated rosemary, and that's just going to scent everything, along with a small bunch of parsley, about 3 tablespoons of finely chopped parsley. When you add the herbs at a later stage, you allow them to infuse and release out their essential oils, but at the same time you prevent them from burning. So while this has sauteed well, in goes 3 cups of short grain rice that I've rinsed twice, and I'm just going to allow it to saute with this entire creation for about a minute to a minute and a half before I add in the hot water. Now out here is a food hack, or a food trick rather, that works really well. When you saute your rice, and if you season it now with some iodized salt, it gives it that nutty texture that's required. So give it a fine sprinkle of some iodized salt and allow it to saute for another minute to a minute and a half. With the rice well sauteed, in goes double the proportions, so 6 cups of hot water, and it's best to use near boiling water so that the internal temperature of this entire pot is not lost. Now just let it cook. As soon as the rice comes up to the same level as the water, we lower the flame and allow it to get to its near perfection state. With the mutton simmering for a near 45 minutes, it's time now to add the final essence into it. So in goes half a teaspoon of black pepper powder, and this is totally optional if you do not want the heat, along with an overload of some tomatoes. So I've got 4 tomatoes finely chopped here, and the reason why you add an acidic element now into the dish is so that your end result is not a hard, unable to enjoy meat. Finally, a fine sprinkling of some scotch bonnet peppers, which is so in tune with the African element. So about 2 scotch bonnets finely chopped going on top, and we're just going to mix all this together along with some potatoes. As we allow this to cook for another half an hour, in goes 500 grams of potatoes cut into dices, and we're just going to allow it to cook in this hearty broth pot. So this flavors are sharp and amazing, and we're just going to let this entire pot now simmer for another 30 minutes and we are good to go. As the rice reaches the water level, it's now time to lower the flame and allow this gorgeous herb rice to cook on the slowest possible temperature for about 15 minutes, and you're ready. With the rice done and the potatoes cooked to perfection, this Jamaican goat curry is ready. All it needs is a fine sprinkle of some cilantro on top, and you switch off the flame. Pairing this along with the rice is a perfect meal to enjoy the comfort of a curry with an international experience within. Don't forget to share loads of love by hitting on the like button, and as always, don't forget to subscribe.